Good evening, Who Dat Nation, and happy Wednesday to our Bayou Blitz family. After a short sabbatical, we are battered, but we are back. And I am Bob Rose. He is Brendan Boylan. We are your co-hosts to your Bayou Blitz. We want to thank you so much for your patience with us the last couple of weeks. While we juggled health, travel schedules, and everything else going on. And if you're joining us live on this Wednesday night, I'd like to thank you for taking time away to watch us instead of the comeback of the greatest medical show and TV sitcom drama. Scrubs is coming back. Tonight's the first night back. I am, of course, DVRing it. I will be watching it as soon as we get off the air. But if you're choosing to watch Brendan and I live instead of the return of Scrubs, thank you so much. And on that note, happy Wednesday to you, Brendan.
Yeah, it's nice to be back on a Wednesday. I didn't know where you were going with that, to be frank. I don't know, like Grey's Anatomy is still on the air. That's the one that comes to mind.
Don't care. Scrubs better. The Pit, Scrubs better. ER, Scrubs better.
Doogie Howser.
Scrubs better.
Can we throw Doogie in the mix too? No, it was a little 2-week break for us. News was a little slow, like you said. Travel schedules, health. You're still battling some health.
Big time.
All the things. So thank you guys for tuning back in with us. Let's be honest, this is the part of the season where it's pretty slow. We're kind of in between. Super Bowl has been over. The season's been over, I should say. We're just hitting the combine. There's starting to be a little bit of free agency news, but ultimately it's still a slow part of the season. So Bob and I are going to talk to you today about maybe some off-season targets, positions of need, really early potential draft targets. We're going to take a brief touch on the combine, and I kind of want to do that right now real quick and just try to keep it very short. Is the one thing that I think you and I have both learned over the last decade of covering this team. We can officially say that now. Isn't that fun?
Yeah.
Over the last decade of covering this team and just the NFL in general, is the combine is becoming, in my opinion, less and less important in terms of the combine on the field and the drills that these guys go through, because half these guys don't partake in drills anymore. The most important thing from the combine is all of the networking and interacting. And it's not just the prospects with scouts. It's not just the prospects with coaches. It's not just the prospects with GMs, but GMs being with GMs, scouts being with scouts. And a lot of handshake deals end up getting made, or gentlemen's agreements end up being made at the combine because everyone's there. Those are the things to watch for at the NFL Combine. Like I said, guys aren't throwing like they used to. Certain guys are skipping certain events that they're not as strong in, right? Or there's guys who altogether say, forget the combine, I'm just going to do a pro day. And that's becoming more popular too. So, Bob, if you want to throw your 2 cents in there, that's just mine. The combine is more for networking, and that's what we should be looking out for, rather than, did someone run a 4.4 or not?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about it. And for those of you that follow me, I'm a track guy. So I do love that part of it from the athletic point of view. But I am never, and I mean never, going to change my draft analysis for better or for worse of a prospect because of how well or poorly they performed at the combine, or whether they performed at all at the combine. I've always been, and I wish more. I'd like to think most. I certainly wish more GMs and coaches would look at it this way. I just want to know, if I'm interested in a guy, I want a player. I want to know if they can play. Doesn't matter whether they run a 4-2 or a 5-2. If they can play football, I want them on my team. So when I do my draft analysis, a lot of times I'll list the combine and or pro day numbers, in my articles. But outside of that, my analysis is purely on what I see from watching film and live game action and taking notes myself. Uh, but what you said about networking, that's what's most important to the teams now. And I don't know how much of the average NFL fan base knows this, but the trades and the deals that get done between free agency and just before the beginning of the draft, the groundwork for the most part is laid out right here. We hear, and I know we're going to talk about a couple of these things. We've heard Derek Carr scuttlebutt, Kirk Cousins scuttlebutt. From a Saints perspective, are calls being made about Chris Olave? Could Alvin Kamara finally be moved? Et cetera, et cetera. These kind of conversations can be taking place face to face. It's not a conference call with 3 or 4 different GMs. It's not hey, you know what, that sounds good, but let's get this team or this GM or this coach involved in it too. I'm going to see if I can get a hold of them and call back. No, everybody is there right now. And that's when the groundwork for a lot of these deals are being made, particularly trades.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's interesting what you said. You wish more GMs would just let the tape speak or whatever the case may be. I think that's true for the most part. But the other thing we've learned a lot over a decade is and especially more maybe over the last 5 years, we're seeing this swing for front offices to maybe skip out on a guy who is a better talent for the guy that's a better fit.
Mm-hmm.
Or the guy who is a little bit more emotionally mature, has a higher football IQ, maybe a guy who, may not be a true second round talent based off of his skill set, but is a first round talent in terms of being a locker room guy or a glue piece or a cornerstone piece to a team. And we're seeing that be something not just in football, but across all sports is becoming much more important to front offices nowadays. Is, hey, look, maybe this guy's here on our board, but after sitting with him at the combine and having that 15-minute interview, this is what we learned about him. And look, we've seen some of these come out over the last couple years, right? I think of Keon Coleman, I think had a very interesting interview with the Bills at the combine, and that video ended up coming out online. I want to say maybe it was Tez Johnson, but it was somebody who got drafted by the Bucks. And they asked him, "Hey, what's your favorite hobbies?" And he's like, "I really like just going to the grocery store by myself and finding the most obnoxious like Pringles combination, and then going home and trying it." And they're like, "I've never heard anybody say that's a hobby." He's like, "Yeah, it's just what I like to do." Okay. I'd much rather draft a guy who likes trying avocado ranch Pringles than I would somebody who's like, "Yeah, I'm at the club until whatever time at night." Everybody's got their preference, but we are seeing things like that becoming more important in draft conversations, which is interesting. But I'm with you.
Yeah, and as a result, we have seen guys drop down draft boards, possibly because of character concerns. The way they handled interviews. showing up to to meetings with an entourage, kind of thing. And look, I'm not judging, but I'll tell you what, when I would judge, if I was a coach interested in a particular player, personality means a lot to me. And there are just, and I'm not going to spell them out here, but there are certain personality red flags that if you show up to a meeting with me, I'm a prospective employer. If you show up to a meeting with me in a certain kind of way, certain kind of demeanor, things like that, that could be a red flag. And that red flag could mean the difference between me selecting you or player B at the same position, who I have rated as a player around as high. So I do hope that young players keep this in mind, as they are, again, this is a job interview. There's really no other way to look at it. For most of these people, players, it's a step in the dream of becoming a professional athlete. So my advice to you would be act accordingly. I mean, there's plenty of time in the rest of your life, to party and goof off and things like that. This is an opportunity for you to take the next step in your dream. So I mean, you've worked hard to get to this point, presumably. You're going to have to work just as hard to get to the next level, and then work even harder to stay and excel at the level after that. So, just be mindful of what got you here and recognize the positives that got you to this point and just keep it going.
Yeah, interviews have been a weird thing. I don't know how much stock I put into things like that, but we can all think of someone off the top of our head who had a quote unquote bad interview, and slipped, or
Hmm.
had a lot of bad interviews and slipped. Use the word entourage like to an interview, and this isn't draft combine related, but I always think of Antonio Brown.
Antonio Brown.
Antonio Brown coming to New Orleans, and we all thought, oh my God, we're going to have Mike Thomas on one side. Even if Antonio Brown is crazy out of his mind, we're going to have Antonio Brown on the other side. That's like, this is the one thing we don't want you to do, Antonio. Just don't come with an entourage and cameras. And what does Antonio Brown do? He comes with an entourage and cameras. Look, say what you will about Antonio Brown, and this is very sidetracked, but it is silly season, and we can talk whatever we want. Say what you will about Antonio Brown, even during some of those years, New England, Tampa, like towards the end, that dude still had all the talent in the world to be one of the best wide receivers in the game. And if New Orleans had that, just string of bad luck, right? Des Bryant, almost Antonio Brown,
Brandon Marshall.
and it's just, man, if we got one of those guys,
Yeah.
we would have been okay. Let's move on from combine and interviews and all that stuff. We have plenty of time to talk about that between now. I say plenty of time now, and April's not that far.
It isn't, and remember, I'm going to be gone because I'll be hanging out in the Bahamas for a week too.
Right. So we have that. Before we move on to the next thing, which would be quarterbacks, how about you tell people about the cruise? And I'm assuming, maybe I'm wrong, I'm assuming tickets no longer available. Maybe they are, but maybe this is the last ditch effort, Bob. So make it count.
I don't know if tickets are still available, and before next week's show, folks, I will find out the answer to that. But we are just a couple weeks away from the annual Get Checked or Check Out Foundation's Go Black and Gold Celebrity Charity Fan Cruise. This year's cruise, next month's cruise, man, that gives me goosebumps to say. Next month's cruise, Thursday, March 26th through Monday, March 30th, in the tropical Bahamas. And if you're interested in going, you get to hang out with this guy, Courtney Roby, with this guy, Tyrone Hughes, with this guy, Michael Lewis, and with this guy, Bob Rose. Not only that, but all of our families are going to be going on this cruise. Uh, this is an annual thing, and it benefits an organization called Get Checked or Check Out. Their website is tcynow.org. Please check out their website. Get Checked or Check Out was founded by Shireen. Uh, a handful of years ago, and put in place to help guide patients and their families through negative medical diagnosis, treatment options, research options, therapy options. You name it, they're there to walk you through the next step with all assistance that they can. Um, when you don't know where to turn next, how to do it, what steps next to take. Get Checked or Check Out benefited over 2,500 cases in 2025, looking to double that number or more for 2026. And I know we're off to a good start, but even though they're there to help us, they need our help to do it. So again, check out their website, tcynow.org. I hope you don't need their services, but if you do, that's what they're there for. You have a little bit of money, you can't beat the charity, you can't beat the cause. Please donate. But the Get Checked or Check Out Foundation's major fundraiser each year is this cruise. I mentioned Tyrone, Mike, Courtney, all of their families are going to be there. And what sets this event apart from really all other events that I've ever even heard of or been a part of at any level of any sport, we are hanging out together with them, with their families, the entire trip. It's not just, well, you get to meet these guys for an hour or 2 hours for this session or that autograph session. No, we're eating meals together. We're getting together for a putt-putt golf tournament, for different beach Olympics, for a karaoke contest. Eating meals together, hanging out on the deck together, hanging out on the beach together. It's just such a wonderful event, such a great time to not only get to know these guys, but we all get to know each other. Again, we have our own conference room set aside, our own gathering spots. So it's like we have our own section of the boat, we have our own section of the beach. Now, a couple other exciting things about this trip. In years past, they've gone to Cozumel, Mexico. Loved that trip last year. This year's the first time that we're going to the Bahamas, to Celebration Key Island, brand new, and Nassau, where we're going to be participating in all these beach Olympic events that I mentioned. A very highly intense putt-putt golf tournament, as well as a cocktail contest. I'm intrigued at that one. Karaoke contest. Listen, guys, all these tickets, all these cabins, they help raise the much needed funds for the mission that Get Checked or Check Out is on. So again, you can't beat the cause, and you get to enjoy a wonderful, wonderful trip in the process. If you have not booked yet, reach out to me. I'll steer you in the right direction, or you can call Summer at 985-788-6584. Summer's with Seven Seas Travel. Tell them that the Bayou Blitz referred you. Again, I'm not 100% sure that there are tickets still available, but if you get a hold of me, I will let you know. I will find out within the next 24 hours. And something also different this year, we're departing out of Jacksonville, Florida, not New Orleans. But if you are coming from the Gulf Coast region, I believe that there are still tour bus packages available where you can all travel together. I'm flying into Jacksonville the night before. But again, this trip is Thursday, March 26th through Monday, March 30th. If you haven't booked yet, I hope you still have time to do so. I hope you want to. Believe me, this is not something you want to miss. And the first time you go to it, you're going to be like me. You're going to want to be a lifer on it from here on forward.
Let's talk some quarterbacks. What's funny is there was a point in time where we we put a rule in place on this show where we wouldn't speak this guy's name. We kind of it was kind of Voldemort ruled, where you just didn't say it. He's the one who shall not be named. But Derek Carr back in the news, and the report today. I want to say it was Jordan Schultz. If that's not correct, I apologize, but I believe it was Mr. Schultz who put it out there that there is an expectation and growing belief that Derek Carr will unretire and look to play in the NFL next season. Well, the interesting part and how that affects the Saints, for people who may have forgotten, is he's still technically under contract with the Saints, and the Saints still hold his rights, which means if he wants to come back and play, the Saints are going to have to trade him because he's not going to be starting for the New Orleans Saints. Yep, that's Tyler Shuck's job. So what does that mean for New Orleans, and what does that mean for the quarterback market? Because you also have reports that Malik Willis, not a first-round pick, but a third-round pick a few years ago. Maybe it was a fourth-round pick. I think it was a third. Titans pick a handful of years ago, who played very well for Green Bay in the absence of Jordan Love, is expected to command near or above $30 million a year. If he pulls that, whoever his agent is, thumbs up. If you guys recall, I was a believer in that kid from the jump.
You were.
I still think he's a talented guy. I don't think he's a franchise quarterback though.
No.
At this point in his career, and then that additionally, brings in, there were some rumbles and some buzzes. I believe it was even the front page of ESPN.com a few days ago about just quarterback outlooks and situations. And Spencer Rattler came up as a guy who could be, getting some calls. Andy Dalton has a former Saint has reportedly had the phone ringing down in Charlotte. So with
Jim Everett, take your ringer off silent. You might be getting a buzz or two. You're next.
So you have a couple former Saints, a current Saint, that are all kind of tied into, hey, what's going on with the quarterback situation? So let's start with Derek Carr, because I think the big question for Saints fans right now is, like, what is Derek Carr worth at this point? And I think you and I are going to come into an agreement here, because let's face it, it's difficult to trade a guy who is unretiring. This isn't a situation like it was a few years ago where Sean Payton was a head coach who was a hot commodity still, and you could go and you could get a high pick for Sean. We're talking about a quarterback who's going to be 36 years old, 35, 36 years old.
Yep.
We're talking about a guy who just took a year off. We're talking about a guy who, we'll say, allegedly retired because of injury, when in all actuality, it was just to get out of New Orleans, right? So even if we're just saying allegedly, the guy's still coming off of an injury at his age, who
and really hadn't played well for 2 years.
And that's where I'm getting at, is like, outside of that few game stretch, really wasn't playing well. Was a guy who was rumored to be a locker room problem. What is Derek Carr really worth? A day 3 pick?
A mid day 3 pick at best. Because I'm seeing some ridiculous demands from fans. Don't do it for anything less than a 3rd round pick, or I'll take a 4th round pick. I mean, first of all, if you get offered that by anybody, you don't even field another phone call. You
take it.
You hit the green light as fast as you can. I can't see it being for anything more than a 5th round pick. And that 5th, 6th.
You might get a 6th and a 7th.
Yeah. I mean, if those are the kind of offers that are coming in, then yeah, you field a couple different phone calls. You try to fish a little bit for a better offer because that's what you do. But I can't see it being for any more than that. Even in a for some teams that are absolutely quarterback desperate, and anybody that even entertains the idea of paying Malik Willis $30 million a year, that's the kind of desperation I'm talking about. But frankly, there are teams that are going to be interested in paying Malik Willis that, or trading for Derek Carr, or trading for Andy Dalton, or dealing with the most recent Aaron Rodgers soap opera. Because I mean, you look at the draft, Fernando Mendoza is going to be the top pick, as he should be. Outside of that, there's not another quarterback that's going to go in the first round.
Shouldn't
I
be.
It shouldn't be. I do think that there's one or two that will surprisingly get picked in the second, whether it's Drew Aller, Cade Klubnik, Nussmeier. At least one, maybe two of those guys are probably going to come off the board in the second round. Not that they deserve to. It's just purely out of desperation, because there are a handful of teams that are just that desperate for a quarterback. And we've talked about it for several years now. When it comes to the NFL and the quarterback position, there's only two categories. You either have your franchise quarterback, or you're desperately trying to find your franchise quarterback. There's no in between. We think the Saints are finally in that first category of, we have our franchise quarterback for the first time since number 9 hung it up in 2020. Well, technically 2021. We think, we hope, we shall see. But at the very least, the Saints are not in the quarterback market this offseason. And again, when you hear names thrown about like Kirk Cousins, I had to get that stab in there. Kirk Cousins, Andy Dalton, Malik Willis, Derek Carr. All I got to say is thank God the Saints aren't in the quarterback market this offseason.
Right. Well, Kirk Cousins expected, or I guess it's not. I guess it's as official as it's going to get. He'll be a post. Post June 1st?
June 1st.
Post June 1st release. We all saw that coming.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be an interesting one. I think it's interesting when a guy like that gets cut at that point, because you've already drafted, right? So it's okay. Is there a team that's just going to throw him in to be the starting quarterback? Again, this is a bad quarterback class, which is funny, because if we were sitting having this conversation a year ago, a lot of people said this was going to be one of the better quarterback classes. Oh, how things change quickly.
And I just laugh because that's not the first time in recent years that people, wait till next year's class, wait till next. Yeah, well, that's what you said last year, and now look. So,
yeah, Klubnik didn't have a good year. Aller got hurt. Arch didn't have a good start to the year. Had a strong finish to the season, but as a guy who's going to be staying for his senior year, which I think he should, Mendoza kind of came out of nowhere to end up being the, I think, undoubted first quarterback off the board. And
hey, I loved him at Cal. You know that.
He's a I'd say he's the projected number 1 overall pick. I'm not sold on the idea that he's going to be like the guy for Vegas, but I think that has just as much to do with the fact he's going to the Raiders,
right,
than it does him. But it's an interesting situation, and like you said, the Saints are fortunate to be in a position where they don't have to really worry. I fully expect them to bring in a veteran guy into camp, but none of the guys we just mentioned.
If they move Spencer Rattler, and I don't really expect that to happen, but if they move Spencer Rattler, I could see them bringing in a guy like Geno Smith, Tyrod Taylor, somebody who has started and had a moderate amount of success in the NFL.
Sure. At this point, I just think it's going to end up being a guy who's hanging on for dear life. That's okay being the emergency quarterback week in and week out. At least I think that's the smart thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see if they're able to. But sometimes that type of guy is just not on the market, and we'll see what this market ends up being. I do find it really interesting that Carolina is getting multiple calls for Andy Dalton. Just interesting. Like that's where we're at right now. That's okay. Interesting.
Early gut reaction. Where do you see Derek Carr ending up?
Ooh. Well, the Jets were one of his finalists the first time.
Oh, I hope he ends up there.
So part of me feels like the Jets would be like the instant gut is like, well, like it was down in New Orleans and New York the first time. So why not? Look, if they're that desperate to get off of Breece Hall, straight swap. That's a good segue into running back, isn't it?
My gut is Carr will end up in Pittsburgh if Aaron Rodgers retires.
That, I mean, I guess Mike McCarthy, like it makes some sense. But bleh. It's going to be the same thing it was. Like, and yeah, Rodgers got him into a position where they were decent, but it's still like what Pittsburgh's done is just prolonged the inevitable. And if you go and you get Derek Carr, you're just continuing to prolong the inevitable.
Right.
And continue to, and the reason that Tomlin got fired, which, I never thought Tomlin was a bad coach, but I think it was one of these things where they were just stuck in mediocrity for so long. It was time to hear a new voice. And I feel like you're setting up Mike McCarthy for the same type of failure if you go and you grab a guy like Derek Carr. That's just my 2 cents, though.
And I mean, knowing Aaron Rodgers is going to play the saga out for as long as he possibly can, because that means people talk about him. The Steelers might make a preemptive strike and say to themselves, you know what, we don't want to be on that end of the Aaron Rodgers soap opera again, and we're just going to trade for Derek Carr now, and whatever Rodgers does after that, F him. That wouldn't surprise me either. But I mean, you could see Kyler Murray on the move out of Arizona. Anthony Richardson supposedly could get traded out of Indianapolis, although I don't know who would trade for him. So yeah, I mean, we're going to see.
You wouldn't trade like a 6th or 7th round pick just to bring, not saying to start him, but just to bring him in the building.
If I had a lot of confidence in my offensive staff, and my offensive staff was interested in him, then I might offer a 7th or a 6th if I had 2 6ths. Just as like you said, as a developmental guy, maybe you stumble onto something. But I mean, we've seen that play out with different prospects in the past, and you and I have always approached it with that kind of logic. What do you have to lose if you can get him for next to nothing? Maybe he pans out. The odds of them panning out, though, Trey Lance didn't pan out. I mean, we can go on and on and on. That's just the first one off the top of my head. But yeah, I mean, if I had a good, solid offensive staff, and I had 2 6ths, or multiple day 3, several day 3 picks, I'd offer a 7th. That kind of situation, maybe.
I'm just in that boat of like what you just said is like, why not take a shot at it? And if it works, cool. If not, you just have another backup quarterback in your building. It's not the end of the world. And I remember having the same conversation when Malik Willis wasn't working out. I was like, hey, what would you trade just to bring him in? Because why not? And I think that's kind of where we're at with Anthony Richards. I think that's a weird situation too. I'm also, and we've talked about this enough, and we'll talk about it more when we get to the draft. I am not a fan of how quickly guys are given up on. And I
No.
know Richardson did some of it to himself. I know Trey Lance probably did some of it to himself. But you're talking about dudes who have, and without even looking up statistics, Trey Lance has got to have what, less than 10 career starts? Richardson's got to have like maybe right at 10 career starts. And we're just giving up on guys and, exiling them to the shadow realms of the bench. Like I don't understand the logic there, because when you spend a first round pick on a guy, it's an investment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen dudes hold on to stocks and investments way longer than NFL franchises hold on to quarterbacks taken in the first round. And that'll just always surprise me. Like, why is that so different? I'm not saying that you have to start them for 2 years to figure out whether it's going to work or not. But I am saying, like, it's ridiculous to start a guy 6 games or less than 10 games and then be like, yeah, this just isn't going to work. Because the other part of that equation, too, is you probably got him in the first round, high in the first round, because you sucked.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So do they really have the weapons around them to succeed, or do you still suck? Like, I don't know. But quarterbacks, that's going to be an interesting one. Thankfully, the Saints are kind of in a good spot. But let's do talk running back. You were telling me, and a lot of the loyal listeners of yours, especially in the New Orleans area, know that you've been posed a question on Jordy's show a little bit lately, and that's like what the whole classic radio question of like, what's the bigger need going into the offseason, A or B? And I think offensively, a lot of that conversation has suddenly shifted to, okay, what's a bigger need, running back or wide receiver? Before we answer that, let's kind of address some of the Alvin Kamara rumors. Right, there are some rumors rumbling that the Saints could look to move on from Alvin Kamara. Have you heard anything from anybody in your trusted circles that indicate the Saints are even looking into that situation?
Reliable sources? No, not that the Saints are looking into. But I mean, they're fielding calls, or having conversations. That's not unusual, folks.
Everybody does.
Yeah. But for the first time, I've always literally blown it off in the past. Especially when a Florio or a Rappaport or whomever, fill in blank with loser name here. Because they're clickbaiting. They're searching for searching for views. This is the first time that I believe that Alvin Kamara could legitimately be moved.
Yeah, it feels real for the first time, doesn't
it? It does. It does. First of all, Alvin's not going to be outright cut. Unless Alvin wants to be cut, and he's not shown, at least certainly not publicly, he's not shown any inclination that he does not want to be in New Orleans anymore. But yeah, I pose this possibility. Pretty much everybody acknowledges that if Cam wants to go ring chasing or DeMario wants to go ring chasing, that New Orleans, out of respect for both players, will probably let them do so. I think if Alvin wanted to do the same, he deserves that kind of respect. And I know, some of you, and you may or may not even throw it in the chats. Well, Alvin said he doesn't want to leave New Orleans. Alvin said he wouldn't play anymore. Alvin says that, and again, he's given no inclination that he wants to leave New Orleans. However, situations change. If a Sean Payton, who really has been the only coach who knows how to use Alvin, if a Sean Payton says, you know what, I can use Kamara in my offense, we could take that next step with an Alvin Kamara with what he's got left. Maybe, just maybe, And that's just a team off the top of my head. Um, I don't think New Orleans is sitting there. I don't think Kellen Moore, Doug Nussmeier, Mickey Loomis. I don't think any of them are sitting there saying, you know what, we don't have a place for Alvin Kamara in our offense anymore. We have to move him. If we can't trade him, we'll release him. Um, no, I think Alvin can still play. I do not think he's a featured back, not at this stage of his career. He needs a running mate, which I mean we're going to get into a little bit more in a second here. So I don't think the Saints are necessarily looking to move on from Alvin Kamara. However, I will acknowledge that it's a realistic possibility that Alvin Kamara will not be a New Orleans Saint in 2026.
Yeah, it's the realest it's ever felt. Let's talk about running mates. I think they tried for Alvin to be his own featured back,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think it worked. Right now, there's multiple reasons for that. Injuries played a role in some of it.
Play calling, design,
Right. There's
several.
A lot of things,
Alvin.
right? But look, he had his best years with Mark Ingram. He had some good years there with Latavius Murray, who I still think is one of the more underrated players in Saints history. Given that if those teams would have won, I don't think he gets talked about that way. But I think he's a big reason why they were still contending at that point. You tried it with Jamal. Obviously, Jamal didn't work in the system and what they were trying to do, but it was consistently trying to find a consistent running mate with Alvin. And when Alvin was asked to be the guy and carry the ball close to 20 times a game, it just didn't work. And that's fine. There's a lot of teams that run in partnerships, right? Or trifectas. And I think the best thing, and we've talked about this, the best thing for Alvin's career would be to have a running mate because it extends his career. It also keeps a little extra magic in the shoes, if you will. Right? Because you're not having to make these ridiculous Alvin Kamara plays constantly. You can kind of keep the pixie dust there and sprinkle it around when you need to. Right? Because as much as we like to compare some of these scat backs that the Saints have had over the years, as much as we like to talk about Kamara in the same breath as Sproles and Sproles in the same breath as Reggie, they're all very different.
Yeah.
Right? Like Reggie was a guy, he was lightning in a bottle, and anytime he touched the football, you had to hold your breath, which made him one of the most special players in college football history, and I think one of the most special players in NFL history. And he was like 5 years too early.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if he got drafted 5 years later? The havoc that Reggie Bush would have had on the NFL. Darren was a guy who was really shifty, but didn't have that same he didn't have that same hold your breath feeling that Reggie did. It was a similar feeling when he got into open space, but it wasn't the same like gasp. And then you have Alvin, who I don't think ever was a guy that had the same electric ability as Reggie, but it was a good blend of maybe the two, where it was get him in open space and watch out. But also, hey, I mean, there's a lot of ways to get this guy the football in. You get him going the right way or whatever the case may be. And that's why I think if you can keep a little bit of extra magic in the shoes and make those magic shoes last a little bit longer, you're going to get the best out of them. And that's why I've been very strong in the belief to this point that it would be smart for the Saints to look at a Jeremiah Love. It'd be smart for the Saints to explore the running back market, Breece Hall or whomever it may be. But that running back is a far greater concern for this team moving forward than wide receiver.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, we know that the Saints are going to reach a contract extension with Chris Olave, at some point, if not this offseason, then certainly early into next year. Um, Devon Vele really showed some nice chemistry with Tyler Shuck. And don't forget, folks, the Saints brought in an explosive big play threat in Trey Palmer. The Saints traded for Jalen Polk, who only a few short years ago was a second round draft choice and a multiple 1,000-yard receiver for the Washington Huskies. Now Polk hasn't really caught fire in the NFL yet, hence is why he was available for a trade. If everybody was healthy at running back for the Saints, at running back and at wide receiver, I like what New Orleans had to start the season with the roster as it's constructed right now. I think I like what the Saints have at wide receiver a little bit better than what they have at running back. Now, Audric Estime, what's that?
I just had PTSD.
Sorry.
You like what you have in the room?
Audric Estime finished the year pretty strong, and I think he's a legitimate candidate for a roster spot. Kendre Miller probably just got hurt before I finished this sentence. Which is why the Saints are one of the reasons, by the way, why the Saints are in need of a running back, because I think they have finally figured out we cannot count on Kendre Miller.
Right.
And as we're sitting here talking about, A, Alvin Kamara isn't what he once was, and B, Alvin has always been more effective in a shared backfield role, whether it's with Latavius Murray, certainly with Mark Ingram. That's why. Don't get me wrong, they're going to add more wide receivers, at least one or two, and I'm not talking. We'll add a couple undrafted guys, a few journeyman veterans, and a 6th round pick. No, if they don't draft one in the 1st round, they're going to draft one in the 2nd, in day 2. They will probably bring in a few young veteran free agents, as they always do. But I feel like Kellen Moore specifically is valuing running back more than wide receiver going into this offseason.
I think you have to. The saying goes, right? Like, young quarterback's best friend is a good running back. You already have one good back, given he didn't play the second half of the season. But if you can add another one, I think Devin Neal was a name that you didn't mention, but
and I'm a big fan of Neal too, so shame on me.
Had a good stretch before getting hurt. Mark asked if we think ETN is a good fit. He does want the Saints to draft him. I don't think he's a good fit. Personally, he's been a guy.
If you didn't have Alvin Kamara, I would say yes, but you do. You need a thunder and lightning kind of guy. Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily mean you have to have a Mark Ingram or a Derrick Henry, a power back per se. But ATN does all the same things Alvin does well. And by that same token, ATN has the same weaknesses in his game that Alvin has. So you essentially have the same thing. I guess that's my long way of agreeing with you that ATN is not a great fit for what you need in this offense.
Yeah, you don't need another like outside zone runner. And that's what ETN has been. I think Jacksonville has tried and had some success in having him run between the tackles more over the last 2 years.
Just like the Saints and Kamara.
Right. But the one thing about ETN, even dating back to Clemson, was the hands weren't super reliable. He's gotten better there, but he's kind of like a tweener, right? He's not quite a dude you want running between, the tackles, play in, play out, but he's not really a scat back either. He's kind of you run between the tackles, okay. If we can get you out off tackle, you're above average. You're an average receiving back. Like, what are you at this point? And I think that's also a reason why he's going to be available.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is, what is this guy at this point? I don't think he's a good fit for what the Saints need.
Mm-hmm.
I did like the fact that Jacksonville brought him and Trevor in at the same time, though. I thought that was going to work a little bit better than it did, bring in the college teammates that won a national championship together. But, albeit it is what it is. I don't, Breece Hall, on like the same token, like I think he does run better between the tackles than ETN does. But I don't know if he's that physical, like super physical punch that you want either. That's kind of where it gets difficult. And as you look at Alvin and you look at his age and you look at the production over the years, and you're like, yeah, we could really use a physical guy to mesh with this guy. But then on the same hand, you have to think, well, how many more years of Alvin are we going to have? Like good years of Alvin are we going to have? So there's a couple things. It's not easy to find a super physical back that can be a guy that plays, 3 downs for you. But I think that's what the Saints need at this point.
Yeah, and I don't think Breece Hall or Kenneth Walker even gets a sniff of the free agent market.
Really? I think
don't.
Hall does.
I don't. I think if the Jets with Hall and the Seahags with Walker, if they can't reach long-term deals with these guys, they'll franchise tag them. And here's my thing about running backs too. And we've seen very good free agent running backs. Josh Jacobs comes to mind, among others. Hit the market somewhat surprisingly, and then get signed by another team for a lot cheaper than what we thought. But I mean, here and Hall and Walker are both 25, by the way. So still their entire careers in front of them. But you look at the Saints cap situation; they're just now climbing out of salary cap hell. And I'm not saying the paying premium dollar for a back that's going to be productive, that you would expect to be productive, is a bad move. But when you're looking at a Breece Hall paying, the latest report I saw is Hall and his people are seeking a contract in the 4-year range worth about $54 million. Kenneth Walker, probably similar numbers. That's a lot of money to pay for a running back when you can get a Jeremiah Love on a rookie deal with a 5th-year option, by the way. This all feels to me like the Saints are zeroing in on Love at pick number 8, maybe even moving a couple picks higher, if they feel they have to get him. Don't get me wrong, I'm not necessarily against drafting a Carnell Tate, a Jordan Tyson, giving Love giving Shuck another weapon. I'm not against a Reuben Bain or a David Bailey, an edge rusher. Not against those at pick 8 either. I just feel like the Saints are zeroing in at running back. Now, if they do go after a Breece Hall or a Kenneth Walker or even a Travis Etienne, if they go after one of these guys in free agency, that tells you exactly what they're going to do in the draft, and it's not going in the direction of Jeremiah Love. I think that much we could be certain of. Another name to keep an eye on, and if they get him, this doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to sway away from Love in the draft, but Kenneth Gainwell is a Pierre Thomas kind of back, a less shifty, less explosive Darren Sproul, a receiving back. I think Kenneth Gainwell will be a great fit for Shuck.
Experience with Moore too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, experience with Kellen Moore. And again, you get a Kenneth Gainwell. He's not a featured back, so you could still conceivably draft a Jeremiah Love. I'm just throwing that out there as an early name to watch.
Kind of reminds me of a Ty Montgomery, right? That the Saints bring in, veteran guy, can do a couple different things for you, that type of thing. I like that thought process. It is going to be interesting what they do with these younger guys, though, right? Because you do have Neal. I think Miller's time in New Orleans is kind of come and gone. I don't see a situation where he's coming back. Estime had a good end of the year, like you said. All those things will be interesting. Mark says, thanks, guys, and I love the show. Thanks for tuning in with us week in and week out. Bob, is there any other players you want to kind of bring to the table before we wrap it up?
We could talk more about Alontae Taylor and potential defensive free agents, free agent strategies next week, I think. But I mean, I do think Neal is going to be a legitimate factor in the Saints' backfield. I'll say this, and I mentioned Gainwell. We talked about Kenneth Hall. We talked about Breece Hall. We talked about ATN. If they feel confident that they can get another year out of another really good year out of Alvin Kamara, and they like Devin Neal, a couple power backs to keep an eye on: A.J. Dillon, Brian Robinson, and a guy you and I have both loved for years, Tyler Algier.
Yeah, Algier's been
all would be very good in between the tackle options that you could bring in, power back options. And maybe if you're the Saints and you really like Devin Neal and you feel very confident that in shared backfield duties, Alvin Kamara can still give defenses nightmares, then maybe we're all barking up the wrong tree and they aren't zeroing in on Love. They feel like we bring in a Tyler Algier or a Brian Robinson. We team them with Neal, with Kamara. We've got a damn good backfield. So, I mean, that's a potential strategy to watch too.
I was really hoping you'd sneak A.J. Dillon back in that after making barking up the wrong tree, because you could say barking up the wrong tree trunks, because that dude's legs are something. That'd be a fun one. A.J. Dillon. Dillon also a massive sports card collector, so from a selfish standpoint, I think it'd be really cool. Because the Saints had a sports card collector on the roster and they let him go. It was Blake Grupe, was a big sports card collector. So I think you gotta when you let one go, you gotta bring one back in.
You do.
It's really interesting to see athletes get into it all these years later, right? Like you collected cards as a kid growing up and no athlete cared that they had, rookie cards, and now you have athletes now that are paying top dollar for rookie cards of themselves. I think that's pretty neat. But that's all for this week. Bob, look, your countdown clock, you're like a month out, right? Is it a month or a little over?
What is today? February 25th?
So yeah,
in less than 30 days. Yeah, in less than 30 days, I will be in Jacksonville, Florida, in a hotel room, waiting to meet everybody at the dock for the Get Checked or Check Out cruise on March 26th. March 26th through March 30th, the Bahamas. Courtney Roby, Tyrone Hughes, Michael Lewis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Get those cabins. Well, you're not reserving anymore. You're outright buying them. But reach out to me. Get your trip set up. I would love to meet new. I can't wait to see the faces I saw last year, but would love to meet new people too. I'm really excited.
Bob and the son. It's just
It's a need.
I was gonna say it's a relationship that goes back farther than time. I know that, and you picked Pennsylvania to live in, and
I
all that
didn't pick. You can blame my parents.
Okay, well, Mr. and Mrs. Rose, you picked wrong because that weather you guys got up there. I'm not sure how much of it you got, but I saw Rhode Island got almost 40 inches, which is unbelievable. My family at Jersey Shore got 2 feet. So pretty.
Now the latest wave we got about 2 inches.
Oh no, that's not bad.
Yeah, that no.
Nothing.
Previous the previous storm. I think at last count I was at like 17, 18 inches. So yeah, that was one of the bigger snowstorms we've had here in several years. But look, I can't wait for the Bahama. 1 inch is and 1 inch too much for me. I need the Bahamas. I need the beach, and I need it now.
Yeah, well, you're getting it. 30 days. Where can people follow you on the World Wide Web as I throw it up on the screen?
Folks, you can follow me on Facebook, Bob Rose, Twitter at BobbyR2613. All of my written works continue to be through the Saints Wire. Right now, I'm flooding the airwaves with year in review pieces. I'm going to continue to do that. But as of March 1st, we will continue the annual Bob Rose tradition of my personal draft analysis, draft profiles, mock draft, draft needs, potential draft strategies, mostly for the New Orleans Saints and prospects I think will fit the Saints' needs. So I'm not going to do really any quarterbacks, any offensive tackles, things like that, positions where we don't think the Saints will address very heavily at all. I have for the years I've been doing this, I've tried to be very conscious on, at least I think, the Saints' positions of need, potential draft steals, things like that. It's something I always enjoy doing, but it exhausts me. So rest assured, any draft analysis you get from me, you just know it's been hours of film study and game tape on that particular prospect. So I do a lot.
And we're looking forward to it. For myself, you can follow me virtually everywhere at BT Boylan. After a 2-week hiatus, nice to come back and talk some football. We will have more, mostly looking at the defensive side and some strategies and what's really going on, because there's some big names that could be on the move for the Saints this offseason as well. So until then, hope you guys find some peace, spread love, practice positivity, and Bob and I will be back next week for another edition of the Bayou Blitz podcast. We'll see you then.
Night.